Hello, friends. Couple quick announcements before we start this week's video. Firstly, I'm sick, so if you notice that I'm talking differently or that my nose and mouth are really shiny, perfectly valid observation. They are. Secondly, this is part 2 to last week's part 1. If you want a little bit more of an introduction to mnemonics and what they are, or if you just really like wind, go ahead and check out last week's video. I'll put a link here and at the top of the description below. Lastly, I told you last week that there was only going to be 2 videos, and I lied. This is part 2 of a 3-part mini-series on mnemonics. This week we're going to cover 2 mnemonic techniques that I use, and then next week we're going to cover another technique that's much bigger with incorporated bits from this week's it's going to be a little confusing, so stick with me. Without further ado, hi, Future Roan here. I don't know what happened. I must have written and shot this in a fever dream. As I said, I've been sick for a little while, and I rambled on for like an hour, and then I cut it down to this 14-minute long video, and it's still really confusing. So if you feel compelled to skip this video, or you could watch it on double speed, or pretend that you watched it, totally fine. Next week it'll be better, I promise. My cold is lifting, and we're done working at the vineyard, so I'll have more time for less of this. Okay, that was the last of the announcements. Straight to the video. We'll begin by talking about the linking system. Last week we talked about how our brains are naturally better at remembering some things than others. For instance, things that interest us are easier to remember. Another thing our brains are good at remembering are things that startle us, things that stand out from the crowd. Imagine you're walking down the street and you stumble onto a light brown Shetland pony practicing knife throwing in a back alley. Immediately, your brain is going to kick into action and remember as many things as it can. You'll remember what the weather was like, what you were doing before you saw the pony, what you were doing after, how the pony held the knives in its hooves. What's more, you'll remember all of this without even trying. Your brain is in the habit of ignoring the mundane and paying extreme close attention to things that are surprising or weird. This brings me to the third thing that our brains are naturally good at: remembering, and more importantly, creating images. We don't actually need to see the Shetland pony practicing knife throwing to have it stick in our memory. Simply imagining it did the trick. By making the conscious effort to solidify this image as vivid as possible, we can actually cement it into our memories. And that image can stay around for a long time and act as a marker. The more vivid and startling the image, the longer it will stay in our memory. So what does this mean exactly? Well, it means that we can translate whatever we want to memorize into these vivid, ridiculous images. And by doing so, have them stick into our memory much easier. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna demonstrate this technique by memorizing a list of 10 random words. I'll memorize them with you and walk you through the images I'm creating. So here's the list of 10 words. And what we're gonna do is we're going to link the first word and the second word by creating an image that incorporates both. And then we're gonna do the same with the second and third word, and then the third and fourth, and so on. If you think you got the concept, go ahead and pause the video and give it a try. Okay, welcome back. I recognize that watching somebody memorize something is not the most entertaining of things. If you'd like to skip this, I don't blame you. Go to this time code, and then you'll have been past all of this lovely stuff. Down to business. The first word we need to memorize is potato. The second is bird. So I'm gonna visualize a flock of potatoes, flying potatoes, eating bird chips that I'm tossing down to them. Now, idea is a difficult thing to visualize. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace it with a light bulb turning on, because that's usually associated with ideas. And thus it makes it an actual physical image for me to visualize. So I'm going to imagine a bird having swallowed part of a light bulb, with the big bulb still sticking out of its mouth. And every time the bird hiccups, the light turns on and it has an idea. Moving on. We need to connect the word idea with wife. So I'm going to picture a woman in a wedding dress, No, I'm gonna picture a big light bulb in a wedding dress. And I'm walking down the aisle to go and get married to this big light bulb. And the moment I get up there, it turns on, and then it runs away because it realizes that we were never meant to be. Then we need to connect wife with independence. Now there's a couple roads I could take with this because independence itself is a very difficult thing to visualize. I could take one of two roads. I could either visualize the Declaration of Independence, but what I'm gonna go for instead is Will Smith from Independence Day. I need to associate that with wife, and so I'm going to picture Will Smith as the person in the wedding dress at the end of the aisle, and I get down there and he's got his big muscly chest and his, his serious look on his face. Yeah, and I think I'll remember the connection between Will Smith and Independence Day. Maybe I'll make it a Will Smith holding an alien in his hand and punching it. Moving on. Then we need to connect independence with Gene. So I'm going to go back to the movie Independence Day, and I'm going to picture his co-star being a double helix, flying around, learning to fly airplanes, how a double helix would do that, fighting aliens, blowing up stuff, just double helix and Will Smith together. They're hanging out, killing aliens and stuff. Next one, need to connect Gene and Diamond. So I'm going to think of like a really valuable diamond that's shaped like a double helix. It's all crystally and shiny, and it's sitting on like a plush pillow on a pedestal, and it's all like well lit. Okay, then I need diamond and elevator. I'm gonna picture a diamond elevator. Walking into an elevator and it being crystal clear, you can see down below you and out all the way around, and the buttons are like the tops of comical cartoon diamonds. Elevator and drawer. So I'm gonna picture myself in this diamond elevator, and the doors open to these chests of drawers that walk in on their own, and then they talk to me by opening and closing their drawers. This is an interesting image, and it shows you can do more than one thing, one image for two things. You can create this sort of short little story that connects them together. Lastly, we need to connect drawer with ladder. I'm gonna picture going to my junk drawer in my family's old home and opening up the drawer and noticing the top of a ladder sitting there, and I'm just gonna pull on it, and it just keeps coming and coming and coming and coming and coming, and knocking stuff off of shelves. There. Now this list is firmly cemented in my memory. All I have to do to recall all of the list is remember just one of the items. I could give the list to you backwards as easily as I do forwards. Even 2 weeks from now, these images, if they're vivid enough, will still be there, and they will give me the links to the true contents of the list. Moving on to the second half of this video, the major system. In the Venn diagram of things to memorize, you have two distinct circles. You have numbers and other things. The overlap, of course, being numbers of things. Things, as we've already looked at, are relatively simple to create images for, and quantities of things are fairly easy to visualize up to about 5. But what about larger numbers? Or what if your image is 47 flamingos? For that matter, what about numbers themselves? How do I memorize a phone number? Or a stranger's social security number? Numbers are inherently arbitrary and difficult to visualize, and they remind me of math, which is inexcusable. But fear not, my friends, there is solace in the form of the major system. It's a code for translating numbers into images in a consistent way, so that the images can be translated back into numbers, and it goes as such. For each number between 0 and 9, we associate a consonant, or set of similar consonants. And from those consonants, we construct a word. From that word, we construct an image, and then boom! We're working with our brain's powerhouse again. There's no one right way to associate consonants with numbers, and you'll find one that clicks for you. I encourage everyone who wants to set up a system like this to check out a couple different combinations and see what works for them. I'll leave some links in the description to ones that I've seen. I've actually read 3 different books where this is mentioned, sometimes as the major system, sometimes as the peg system. And in each of those books, there was a different combination of consonants to numbers. But the one I'll show you, I learned from a book called Master Your Memory by Ramon Campayo. I'll tell you the number, the consonants it's associated with, and how you can better remember those consonants. 1 I associate with T or D, because 1 looks a lot like T without the top, and the D uses the same parts of the mouth. 2 I associate with N, because a lowercase n has 2 downward strokes. 3 I associate with the sound of M, because of the 3 downward strokes in the lowercase m. 4 I associate with the sound of K or C. You can remember it because of the 4 points on the letter K, and the word fork. 5 I associate with L. You can remember it by thinking of the word live, or if you're a fan of the movie Short Circuit, number 5 is alive. 6 I associate with the sound of the letter S, or SH, the sh, because the spelling. 7 I associate with the letter F. The characters look quite similar. 8 I associate with the G of G, and 8 looks quite similar to a lowercase g, and also the word contains a G. 9 can be a bit of a confusing one, because I associate it with P because the 9 looks quite similar to a P, B because they use the same motion of the mouth, and V because they sound quite similar. Lastly, 0 I associate with R. Because the S sound has already been taken by 6, we use the other consonant in the word 0 to get the R. I'll stress again that this particular combination works for me. It's just the one that I've memorized. And by all means, you could associate completely different letters with completely different numbers, or mix and match them. Whatever combination you choose, try not to change it. If you change the code, then you have to go back through and change all of the images you created. To give you an illustration, we're going to memorize my social security number. We're gonna memorize the first 10 digits of pi. In order to do that, I have to look up what the numbers are. The first 10 digits of pi, 3.141592653. A good way to practice the translation of numbers into words is to write out the number and put the chosen letter of your system underneath that number. For instance, 3 would have M underneath it, 1 would have T and D, 4 would have K or C underneath it, and so on. So I'm going to go with Muddy Cattle Vine Slime, and I'm going to picture a herd of cattle walking through a vineyard, and they are licking the slime that's being oozed from the vines. Muddy Cattle Vine Slime. That's a pretty distinct image. Now all I have to do is associate that image with the word pie. There we go. Now we have 2 mnemonic techniques in our pockets. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that watching me memorize things as examples wasn't pure tedium for you. If it was, then at least there was some nice music. That's a good bonus. I will see you next week when we're going to be talking about memory palaces.